wanted to give a little update on the situation of the proposed referendum for Alberta to vote on whether or not they want to separate from Canada to become their own sovereign state versus if they want to stay with Canada. And I've been covering this story for a little over a year now, and which has not been hard to do because it's grabbing a lot of big headlines in Canada, so it's been easy to find lots of information on it. And yet I haven't done any videos yet in May of 2026, that is. And we have important updates on this whole situation. And just to sort of recap for people who uh, didn't see my previous videos or otherwise are unaware of this situation, um, I started following this story back a little over a year ago when I read an article in the Calgary Herald, which of course Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and that article was about this petition, which has been spearheaded by the Alberta Prosperity Project, and the twist in that article I read way back in, I think it came out May 12th of last year, of 2025, was that Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, had tabled some legislation um, called Bill 54, the Election Statutes Amendment Act 2025. Um, and that bill, if passed at the time, I didn't know if it was going to pass yet, and if passed, it would lower the threshold of the amount of signatures needed for a citizen initiated petition. So for citizen groups to call for a referendum on the ballot. And so the bill did indeed get passed. I think it was May 14th or May 15th of 2025 that the bill got passed. And so that lowered the threshold of signatures needed to put this separatist referendum on the ballot. And it also extended the amount of time that groups would have to collect signatures about it. And so that bill did indeed pass, and ever since then, again, the separatists have been spearheaded by the Alberta Prosperity Project, and so the time they had to collect the signatures to get their referendum on the ballot was from January 3rd of 2026 until May 2nd of 2026. And so by May 2nd, they had collected many, many signatures. They actually kept collecting them right until the deadline, which I think was smart of them, very smart, um, because they were able to gather plenty of signatures. And like I said, Bill 54, the Election Statutes Amendment Act, lowered the threshold of how many they needed to just shy of 178,000 to get their petition on the ballot. It was 177,732, I think, is the exact number they needed. And so they announced um, last Monday, about a week ago now, which was May 4th, that they had delivered uh, more than 300,000 signatures, actually 301,620, I think the exact number is. And so that's exciting. They got that very much accomplished. And their petition is called Stay Free Alberta. And of course, they delivered all these signatures for the petition to Elections Alberta, which is the governing authority. And from here on out, the now Elections Alberta would need to verify all these signatures and certify them to be able to get the petition on the ballot. So all this very interesting, a lot going on here. And just to be clear, what is the wording of the referendum question that they want on the ballot? And I quote, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? So that's the goal here. And of course, the separatist movement has been going on. Well, separatism has been going on for well over a century now in Alberta, and it really picked up last year and this year because it's looking like a referendum will finally get on the ballot. And so normally what happens is once you deliver all these signatures to Elections Alberta, they would have about 3 weeks to verify and certify all the signatures. But it's so fantastic because they had turned in more than 300,000 signatures and they only need just shy of 178,000 signatures to be verified and certified. So I think they have a good shot of making that happen. But there is also a sort of roadblock in the road for them right now because in April of this year, of 2026, I'm talking, a an Alberta judge issued a temporary injunction on the certification of this petition. Yeah, on April 10th, that was done. And why is that? Because a lawsuit had been brought by some First Nations groups who they have, in my opinion, what seems like a pretty strong legal argument that they're arguing that the petition violates their treaty rights. And these treaties are between the First Nations and the government of Canada, right? It's didn't have anything to do with the province at the time. And so I think, yeah, right now, the certification of all these signatures is totally on hold while the courts are sorting out the situation. And so that sort of put this thing on hold, and I'm waiting to see what the heck the courts decide. Do they buy the First Nations argument that this would violate their treaty rights? Because again, these treaties are between the First Nations and the government of Canada. And so their argument would be that Alberta doesn't have the right to just pull itself out, pull the whole province out. And was that because the province of Alberta, if you want to look at how much of the province is on treaty lands, that would be about 98% of the province. And I don't want to make anybody get confused between when I'm talking about treaty lands and First Nations reserves, because just the First Nations reserves, that only makes up between 1 and 1.5% of the land in Alberta, but the treaty lands cover most of the province actually, because yeah, about 98% of the province of Alberta, of their land, is covered by Indigenous treaties between, again, the First Nations and the Government of Canada. And which treaties are the Treaty 6 covers central Alberta. Treaty 7 is the area south of that, southern Alberta. And then Treaty 8 is the northern half of the province. So that's pretty much the whole province in there. So we have to wait and see what the courts decide on whether this petition could be certified or not, right? That's up to the judiciary right now, pretty much. And so that's the roadblock in the mix. And so once that does get settled and if the preliminary injunction gets lifted and that turned into a permanent one, right? You have then Alberta would have about 21 days to certify and verify all the signatures. And so that means we might know very soon whether or not the referendum will make it on the ballot, right? We don't know yet, but we might very, very soon. And and yeah, I'm gonna definitely keep track of this and bring another update to this channel as soon as we find out if it will be on the ballot. And now, if this temporary injunction gets lifted, and then Elections Alberta does certify the petition, and they get the referendum on the ballot, there's, in my opinion, two things that are standing in the way of the potential separation of Alberta from Canada. Again, if that petition is on the ballot, number one is the, well, I guess the Clarity Act of 1999, which of course was a reaction to the province of Quebec twice holding a similar referendum on whether they would separate from Canada or not. And and what that outlines is the process by which it would be up to the House of Commons. So we're talking the federal government in Canada to decide whether or not the results of a referendum express and I quote, clear expression of a will by a clear majority of the provincial population. So that's the one thing that stands in the way. It's just a province in Canada can't just unilaterally secede on its own. First, it has to, well, get a clear expression of a will by a clear majority, and that would be determined not by the province but by the federal government, the House of Commons in Canada. So that will be a tricky hurdle to get through, and then of course that would just sort of start a long period of negotiations between the province and the federal government. So that's the one thing that's standing in the way. Even if they get a petition showing a majority of people want this, then it's about negotiating with the federal government, who gets to be the one to decide, even if that petition shows a clear expression of a will by a clear majority of people. And yeah, you can imagine how the federal government might have a vested interest in keeping the province from leaving. So that's one thing. And the other thing is what the polls are showing lately. The polls are really showing how, and we don't always trust all the polls because it's really all about getting voters to show up on the day of the election, on the day when they can vote on this referendum. And but the polls are showing right now, the latest polls I looked at showed uh, just shy of 29% of the people polled say that they would vote to secede from Canada, to separate from Canada. Whereas nearly 67% of the population polled says they would vote to remain with Canada. So if we want to go by the polls alone, it's not like looking like the referendum would get a majority. But again, it's all about getting the vote to turn out on the day of, and so we can't always just go by what the polls are saying, just shutting it down. But anyway, so I definitely wanted to bring you that little update. And then again, the two little updates on the situation are: number one, the Alberta Prosperity Project has turned in, they have submitted way more signatures than they would need. So once Elections Alberta can verify all of these signatures, or at least some of them, they only have to verify at least well, just shy of 178,000 for the petition to be put on the ballot. There's that. And secondly, they can't even start the checking process, the verification process yet, because right now a court has put in a temporary injunction against the petition being certified because of a lawsuit brought by some First Nations groups who say that it violates their treaty rights because most of the province of Alberta is on treaty lands. And so, according to the people who filed the lawsuit, the First Nations, um, Alberta doesn't have the right, it's not their land to just pull out of Canada, right? There are treaties in place. So, anyway, those are the two little pieces of the story that I wanted to bring a little update to this channel for. And so, if you have any strong feelings on this, if you are watching this right now on the live chat, I would like to see them. And if not, if you're watching it on the replay, please do put them in the comments. I would love um, to further discuss this in the comments section. And since I don't see any questions or comments in the chat specifically about um, this issue, I guess I'll say again, I'm hoping to hear from you in the comment section. And thank you for everybody who did tune in. And again, you'll be able to watch this on the replay because I will certainly make this public right away. And so I hope to hear from you in the comments there. And thanks again for watching. And yeah, I promise as soon as there's an update on the story, I will bring it right to you right here on Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou. So until then, catch you around next time. Bye bye.